So I spent um, a day um, just kind of viewing my own person recorded, and this wasn't a day; it was like a partial day, just to look back on the things that I had projected onto, onto YouTube and onto the consciousness about the things that I was thinking. And one of the things that I had put out there was my opinion about Cleopatra. And once I looked at the recording and I looked at what was happening to me during the recording, I I took it off of YouTube because I felt like once I had watched it and I watched the way that I was reacting, my throat was being bothered. My throat was itching. I was having some things in my mind that wasn't. It seemed like something was trying to interfere with the way that I was speaking, and so once I watched it, I took the recording off, and then I thought, okay, so why not just re-record something and then you know, reproject it, and then because it's still my same opinion of her. It's just that the way that it was explained in a way that was so. It seemed like I was so bothered. I was touching my throat. I was looking the other way because I seemed like I was so bothered, and I was bothered. I was bothered because at the time that I was doing it, I was having a problem with my throat, and I was having problems speaking. And then some of the things that I wanted to say, just it was when I wanted to think of something, it would just disappear. It wouldn't. Like normally when I'm speaking, the words would just. I'm thinking about everything I say as I say it, and then at that point, as I was thinking what I was going to say, it seemed like there were words that would be there that just weren't there when I got ready to speak them. And then it took me a minute to stop and stop for a long time to really think about it, like, okay, what did I want to say right there? And then say it. And so that really bothered me. So I'm going to re-record this in a way where I'm going to reproject this out onto YouTube. My opinion of Cleopatra after I watched it. I watched a documentary on Netflix, and then once I watched a documentary on Netflix, I also watched another documentary on YouTube. I read about Cleopatra when I was growing up, and then I actually read a little bit about Cleopatra after, not after, but before all of this came up a few years ago when I saw a book on Cleopatra. And I'm going to be honest and say I didn't read the whole book, but I read enough of it to know that I have kind of an opinion on it. And what I wanted to really talk about then that I don't think I really got across was my opinion of her now as an adult, compared to my opinion as a child, and what I think of that person. And why for me it didn't matter a whole lot whether she was darker skinned or lighter hued, darker hued or lighter hued. Just didn't matter. So one, I didn't think she was a very good person. I really don't think she's a very good person. My honest opinion of her is that she was having a dispute with her family. Her family exiled her. She was co-ruler with her brother. He couldn't have exiled her just on his own. It couldn't have just been his decision. A lot other people had to make their decision with him because they were both co-ruling. So if all of the people around them made that decision, why did they make that decision about her? They probably made that decision about her because of all the things she did after that. And all the things she did after that shows her character when they made the decision, and it showed that character did not change. So basically, you were talking about this person who was honestly not, she murdered her brother, had her sister murdered by one of her lovers. She had a dispute with her brother and probably her family to be exiled in the first place, and maybe even a lot of Egypt. And so once she was exiled, she brings in Greeks to um, settle the dispute. So she's exercising her power. Well, she's trying to gain power through the manipulation of men. And then she's not doing a very good job of it, because the men that she's trying to manipulate did not gain her love from her country. And it granted her back a queenship, but not one. I still feel like with the queenship that she got, she really wasn't loved by the people. And so it kind of gets me to wonder about who was in Egypt at the time and why would they still follow her. And it makes me wonder what that conversation was in that war with her and Mark Antony, when she made the decision to send the Egyptians home in the middle of that battle and to retreat, in the case where they lost that war. And which was said it was by a decision that she made. And then it also makes me wonder about why those people who could have backed her and Mark Antony did not back Egypt at that time. And I feel like they didn't back Egypt because she was the one who Egypt had, placed in queenship. Being that, at that time too, the brother and the sister were dead. It still didn't mean that they had to place her there. They could have easily enthroned someone else who was better qualified to do that job. And I wonder why it is that in Egypt they did not do that, and whether people were so concerned with that if they didn't do it. So it led me to a lot of questions, and it made me wonder about being a child, about being that person who, when I was a child, someone told me they romanticized this person. They projected this person at me through these history books that were supposed to be so courageous and such a seductress and such a person who would do anything for this country that she seemed to be trying to give away to Greece, to Rome. And so I didn't understand that. I didn't understand these people who were adults before me knew this history of her and still decided to project this history of her that didn't seem to be the history that they were projecting at all. Yes, I do feel like she probably was seducing them. I do feel like she might have even had feelings for both those people. But then I don't know that. And so I don't say that she did. I don't feel like it was absolute love, because for all we know, Caesar just could have been someone that she was using. The way that they speak of her, like she was in charge, like she was someone who was very much manipulating these men. And I feel like what they explained to me was someone who was trying to manipulate men who ultimately were manipulating her. And able to then use Egypt or take over Egypt as, through that manipulation, and make decisions in Egypt that they should not have been allowed to make. So that was my thoughts on that. I mean, you telling me that this person was so horrible that she had a dispute with her brother, ended up in exile, and then it had to be a dispute with the court. So in order to get exiled by a co-ruler, you probably had a dispute with the court. And so having a dispute with the court got her exiled. Once she was exiled, she brought in Caesar to settle that dispute, or to be a component within that dispute to give her power. Bringing Caesar in with the Roman army gave her power back. But once she got that power, when you think about it, she was trying to get that power or settle that dispute with Rome against a sibling. So for one, to me, that was a horrible decision, and that was something that to where she did not put her country first, and because Caesar walked into that dispute in the way that he did and took over the way that he did, it also told me, it also kind of made me think about the things that she would have promised him and told him in order for him to come in and do that. What was he to gain by coming in and settling a dispute with Egypt? So it made me feel as though she gave the country away in order to do that. And then on top of that, saying that she gave the country away, basically giving away military secrets, telling him about the family, telling him all the things that she or Egypt would do for him or for Rome if he did that. When she settled that dispute, then she leaves for Rome because she's pregnant by Caesar. They're saying that it's because she feared her position in Egypt, which of course she would, because if she was coming in to the Egyptian court with the Romans to settle a dispute, she would probably end up very much unliked. You brought the Roman army into this country in order to take charge and give you power. So I could believe that she went to Rome for a long time. She only left Rome because her son was not given power over Rome. That makes sense. So then, okay, once she does leave Rome, she goes back to Egypt. Her sister has established, her brother actually was still in Egypt, so she murdered her brother. Her sister had some power, and at some point had even established some power herself as ruler or regent in Egypt. And her sister was someone who was very much against Caesar. That made complete sense. Caesar had come in on a family dispute upon her nation. She was against Caesar. That makes complete sense to me. Her being against Caesar and wanting to assassinate Caesar makes complete sense to me. Since he was the head of Rome and he thought he was running Egypt, for you to assassinate the head of Rome makes complete sense to me in so many ways. Because then it's like, now you're in a war with us. Because you're establishing power, and then you're establishing power on a behalf and trying to install someone that we don't want in power. So it said something to me that she was trying to assassinate Caesar and not trying to assassinate Cleopatra. Cleopatra was her sister. So for her to not assassinate Cleopatra, it would have been just as easy for her to assassinate Cleopatra as it was for her to have support assassinating Rome. But maybe she didn't have support assassinating Cleopatra because Cleopatra was both her sister and her brother's sister. Her brother could have assassinated Cleopatra in the beginning, but instead exiled her. That told me that neither the brother or the sister was trying to assassinate her. They not only let her go to Rome, live in Rome, but then travel back to Egypt from Rome and didn't assassinate her then. Okay, so this tells me something about them. They were not trying to assassinate their sister, although their sister did assassinate them. Which means that her murdering the brother, and then by poison, that's a horrible way to murder somebody, by poison. It's a horrible way to die. It's a painful way to die. She would do that to a sibling. And then she, who did not murder her, but did exile her. Exile is not the same as murder. You're exiled, probably even with a stipend from Egypt, where you could go anywhere you want to and probably live. Not to mention you're part of Egyptian royal family, which means something. So it's likely you could have lived in someone else's court. So exile in murder means two different things. So the fact that she didn't murder her brother and then she asked Mark Antony to murder her sister told me a lot about her, told me she wasn't a very good person. So as an adult, I'm looking at the history of that, and I'm looking at these same people, I was a child when I first heard the stories from adults, and then I look again as an adult and I see what I see, but there are other adults explaining the story in the same way. And then I look at who projected the story in the first place. Well, the retelling of this story comes a lot from those of lighter hued descent, probably a lot from the people of Rome and a lot from the people of lighter hued descent in the world who researched Egyptology. And these themes, that they place on this. This person is trying to hold on to Egypt no matter what. She wasn't trying to establish Egypt as its own power. She was trying to hold on to power in Egypt. And so as an adult, I heard that. As a child, I heard, oh, this person was valiant and courageous and willing to do anything to hold on to her beloved country. As an adult, I hear this as this person is power hungry and actually ridiculously evil. And she's willing to not only murder her siblings, but to manipulate Roman generals to keep a spot at the top of Egyptian society that was not even on his queenship if it was going to be run or managed by Rome. And so, and then when people as a child told me, well, she had these romances with Mark Antony and Caesar, I saw that as, oh, this seductress being rolled out of a rug and seducing these powerful men. As an adult, I'm like, this is a queen, supposedly, of Egypt, who had wealth enough to build an Egyptian army, who could have confronted and maybe even rivaled Rome, who did not do that. Instead, she was fucking Roman generals and trying to manipulate them in order to keep power in her country. And it honestly looked to me like she was trying to give the country away to them and maybe even barter that or roll that into some sort of power in Rome while she was there. Not because she had that master plan, because she doesn't seem to me a person who had the honest tactical intellect to have that master plan, but one who honestly was thinking, because she was now put into that space to where she was having children, though illegitimate children, by the way, by these Roman generals. Because the Romans did not respect women in that way. They didn't hold women in that high esteem. And then in Roman society, they didn't like outsiders coming in to rule. So a tactician probably would have perceived that. And you know, how were you going to roll that in part of a plan to rule Roman society? What it really looked like to me was she actually just ended up being pregnant by these dudes, whether it had been on purpose or not on purpose. And then once she was pregnant by them, she was hoping to get something out of it by having her children installed on Roman thrones, on Roman in Roman society as heads of Roman society. And that did not come out for her. You know, one, these people had in Rome and through Roman law, which is the countries they were ahead of, taken Roman wives. Then, two, factoring in the fact that Romans did not like outsiders coming in to rule. Neither did Egypt. For a very long time before she came in, her and her family came in. So when I look at that now, I see someone who is ridiculously evil, and someone who's trying to, I don't see her as I don't even see her, I see her as a seductress, but not in the way that they see her as a seductress. I see her more as someone who was able to seduce someone, older men at this time, because Caesar was much older. She was probably about 22 or 23. She was really young. So I see her and Caesar as someone who was young and able to seduce an older man. And I see her with Mark Antony, seducing him with all of the treasures that she brought upon that ship to Mark Antony, because they're saying that she didn't answer his call when he first summoned her because she was a queen. But no, when she did answer his call, she brought a boat full of treasures and presented it to him. So I feel like maybe that was stalling to find out what she was going to do, because she saw herself in a position where she didn't really have power, because she wasn't tactician enough to really build up an Egyptian army that could rival or go against Rome at that time. All of that wealth she brought on that ship, she could have used to build up an Egyptian army, even if she had to recruit from inner Africa to rival Rome, and then got allies to go up against Rome if Rome decided to invade Egypt or be angry about her not answering that summons. Because for me, that would be something that a queen would do. And so I don't see any of the decisions she made being those of someone who was a leader, but more of someone who had ended up being pregnant by some dudes that maybe she fell for, or those that she probably was thinking that she could seduce in order to manipulate into giving her power back in her own country, which to me is not a very queenly thing to do, because why are you going over here? If your family is still established in that country, why are you going to another country to manipulate them and basically give your country away for them to come in and establish some sort of power dynamic with your own family? So that's my take on it. I did in the first video say a few things. I think I kind of went over long in the way that I was explaining it. I think at that time I was kind of emotional. I still had the thought in my mind of all the things that I was thinking. I wasn't very angry about it, with the exception that probably some things she did when she was doing all of that changed the evolution of Egypt in a way that was probably very advantageous to Egypt itself. And so that would have made me angry. But at the same time, I wasn't very angry. But I was a little alarmed at the fact that I was a kid and people did tell me these same facts. And I didn't see it the same way that I do now. And now being an adult, I can't believe that other adults look at that and don't see it in that way. They don't see it in the way where they see this person as this terrible person. This is a terrible person who literally murdered her brother and had her sister murdered. I mean, to see that, to romanticize someone like that, and to give some sort of credence, credit, or esteem to someone like that, to me, is ridiculousness. I don't care what country she was the head of. If her brother and sister were not outrightly trying to kill her, and they had every opportunity to kill her, and then to see her as someone trying to hold on power, when it seems like the most of the documentary, it was her trying to give that power away, and then trying to roll the fact that she gave that power away into trying to get some sort of power in Rome. And so I see it very much as an adult now. When I was a kid, you could tell me some ridiculousness, but you can't. Now I see it and I analyze it in a very different way. And I don't really care if she's darker hued or lighter hued. She really is acting more like some of the lighter hued women I've seen behave. Lighter hued women I've seen behave where they don't care how evil or how vile the person, and I'm not saying all lighter hued women are like this, and I'm not saying all lighter hued people are the same, but they have a cultural ancestry where it was the most vile or the most evil, the most violent, the most, the one who was able to be the most ruthless, who gained power and gained money. And then there were so many women, competing to be with that person who was in power, no matter how evil he was. And so African ancestry is very different, because Africans were living still by the lapis lazuli for a very long time. And so they were very much living in, keeping up, managing, and indulged in and in love with living in a paradise. And the Europeans marched into that feeling as if somehow they were more technologically advanced because they had, like I said, they were more capable of blowing shit up and had lead paint on their walls and then making houses out of all these cut down trees and killing all of this wildlife that is there in order to they're not only beautiful and kind of amazing in themselves, but to keep the flow of the ecosystem and take care of the earth along with us. And so all of the things that the Europeans thought they were so great for are the things that the Africans thought were abominations. And so they marched into paradises, establishing different abominations, and then forcefully through torment, rape, and just absolute ruthlessness, entrenching that into the people, and then turning the land into something that was polluted and something that was turning what was an abundance into an abundance for very few people, in some sort of classist stupidity that puts these horrible people at the top who have a lot and pay little attention to those at the bottom, or who they perceive as the bottom, who have a little. You see what I'm saying? And so that makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to march into a paradise and think that because you're more violent and more ruthless, and because you have done more destruction in your land and depleted more of your land in order to trade, to become, to participate in this unconscious spell of race to the top, or race as a whole as far as hue, think that you're better. And so I think that too, Cleopatra, and then in Cleopatra's day, Greek society was very much modeled after Egyptian society in so many ways, but then it was still very connected to that Western European sense, where it was a very much warring country. And in that competition, in the way that the African societies really weren't participating. Yes, African societies did have a lot of war. They had conflicts, of course. And societies might have conflicts. So did the Native Americans. But as a whole, those societies still looked upon a paradise and knew that they were living in a paradise, and did not participate in that kind of system the way that the Europeans did, and deplete the resources and kill up everything in sight to establish whatever it is that they've established all over this place. That seems to be, very much produce people into, like, I'll say, vagabondism, or people who don't have enough in a place of extreme abundance. And I mean, for a long time, they even had people thinking that the earth was overpopulated. And I knew from the greater consciousness that that was stupid and that was a lie. But at the same time, people are so entrenched in this flow of awfulness that they have the capacity to even believe that, or even consider that there was overpopulation, when there's really, a uneven distribution of what is here. That doesn't even have to be a distribution. If it was not ruthlessness that was organizing societies, that was making it, that was forcing it to be distributed rather than cultivated. So basically, that is my take on Cleopatra. I wanted to redo it again. I just didn't like the way I was grabbing my throat. I didn't like the way it was hard for me to speak. But that's my take on it. When I read about her now, it's like, ooh, this is not a good person. And then what if she was just some person who was just so into them European dudes, that she was able to just sell her family away. We've seen that in society. They don't seem to see her like that because they want to romanticize her. And I believe the romanticism only comes from them being Caesar and Mark Antony, because Rome has this kind of esteem in the society of the people who do project these biographies about these people and who have access to this information. They then romanticized her instead of speaking that story in the way that it really is. Because no way you so angry at your brother that you go to this foreign country and you put this foreign dude before him, or your sister. No way are you really that great a person if you're going to do that. I mean, that's just, to me, that's a romanticizing of somebody who is really kind of, and in the last video, I used the term empty-headed bitch. I didn't really want to use that term now, but it seemed a little bit like that. You know what I mean? Like somebody who just, okay, you know, like somebody would say, well, the D is so good or whatever it is that she sees in these people, that she's literally capable of not only going against her brother and sister for them, but giving up her country and then murdering them. It shows me that Mark Antony's not very smart if he is capable of messing with someone who's capable of murdering her sister. Why would you tell your lover to murder your sister? Why would your lover, who then murders your sister, still be your lover? Why would he be so ridiculous that he would honestly do that? Okay, what would he see in a person who was so ridiculous that she would ask him to murder her sister? Even if you would go murder your sister, why would you take that to somebody that you were screwing? Why wouldn't you take that to somebody that outside of that, even if you were going to, even if you thought she was trying to murder you, and then on top of that, the person that you're screwing, you want to have, you know, it shows his character that he was capable of having children and wanting to be with somebody who would actually do that to her sister. Or was it that he actually spent those 3 years in Rome because he knew who she was and really didn't want to spend that time with her? He couldn't have really respected her because he did leave her, go to Rome, and take a Roman wife in Roman society, even though she was supposedly an Egyptian queen. What does that say about him? And then when he does leave Rome, go to Egypt, he's on a, you know, the person that he was against was very powerful. So he's in a position where he's trying to establish himself as a powerful person, and he wants to use Egypt for that. So he goes to Egypt with Cleopatra, you know, what it looks like, in order to use Egypt and Cleopatra in order to fund himself, setting himself up in Rome as a powerful person. So it seems like him going to Cleopatra at the time that he did, after the 3 years, had a lot to do with him trying to establish himself in Rome, not in Egypt. So what does that say about him? What does that say about what he feels about her? And then him feeling that way about her, her still having that child, doing something so ridiculous as to murder her sister, which he could have done probably, because if the sister murdered were supporting the murders of Caesar, she could have supported the murders of him. But to be in bed with somebody to whom this was her sister, and to order that assassination through her because she asked him to, it shows his character, and it shows the ridiculousness of that person. And so he doesn't have any esteem, as far as I'm concerned, either. And so I look at these people completely differently. And so they make us look at these people coming in to face them. Sure, the other guy who was set up in Rome could have actually left Egypt alone, you know, because it wasn't his business to go into Egypt and to do anything, have anything to do with Egypt. So that was a completely different conflict. Although they do try to set it up as his conflict is with Mark Antony, because Mark Antony insulted his sister and did not like Cleopatra. Or maybe he saw an opportunity to take over Egypt and to have some sort of position as far as, territorially having Egypt pay more taxation or tribute onto Rome. So it could have been so many different things added into that. So, seeing this person like that, it's a little bit different when you see him. I don't like what he did, but at the same time, that was the way that he was set up. And so Mark Antony and Cleopatra made it very easy for him to do that. And to think that Mark Antony and Cleopatra made it easy for him to do that, it really started with Caesar in the first place. So I don't see this story as a romantic story. I see it as someone who was very foolish and someone who was not as smart and not as strategic as the historians like to make her. And I feel like the only reason they are pushing this strategic, romantic view of Cleopatra is because of the involvement with both Mark Antony and Caesar, and them being Roman and Rome having esteem with that particular, like I said, those societies. Rome is a brand, kind of like, those people setting up brands in place of paradises, and then people getting esteem through brands. Because if you really look at the world today, that's kind of what you see. They have, marched into paradises and set up brands, and now people are they want brands instead of wanting paradises. Or at least, and then, a lot of you people think that's what we want, but that's not really the thought processes of so many people. It's just the thought processes of those people who have been able to flow in their society much easier than others, because some of us others are not as susceptible to ridiculousness and evil, to mask over evil or look past evil for branding or contamination or uneven distribution. You know what I mean? Basically, to ruthlessly keep people from cultivating for themselves is what I really want to say, rather than distribution. And so that's my take on Cleopatra. I'm going to post both there. So if you want to look at both, that's fine. But I really needed to do this other ones because it was much, on the day that I did that one, something really was bothering my throat. And so it was hard for me to talk. And so when I was trying to organize my thoughts, I was trying to organize it both with that being, bothering me. And then having the kind of stress of that and the strain of that distract me from the flow of the words that I wanted to communicate and project out into the consciousness. So like I said, that's my view. I will see you all when I make another video.